Maker Studio coming at you today. We're going to be joined by the Mead Institute. This is our 55th attempt at making this happen. So hopefully we can get that going. I'm having incredibly terrible internet connection issues today. So that's always fun. And again, it looks like there have not gotten any better. So that's unfortunate. It's good to know that I pay incredible amounts of money for cell phone service and Wi-Fi and all these things, and it just doesn't work. And there's probably even people joining who may be catching every fifth word of what I'm trying to say, and it's not even letting me know that. So, yep. Oh, it looks like the Mead Institute was able to join back in. I'm sure it's been incredibly choppy for everybody else. Let me know down in the comments, anybody, if you're watching, what my connection issue or what my connectivity is, or if I'm having issues. I may have to just, I already restarted my phone once. I'm not sure why the internet gods are not shining upon me tonight. Hey, what's up, Anthony? Appreciate you, bro. Cheers, man. Oh, well, hey, that means I got at least one, somebody who can send, gives us a better connection. Otherwise, we may be able to, fingers crossed.
Hey there.
Howdy. Are we on live time this time, or are we still on a gnarly delay?
No, I can hear you fine this time.
Excellent. Hey, the mead gods have outshined the crappy technology gods. I'm here for it.
Well, I hope it's okay. I have a baby with me, and Alyson should be joining here in a second.
It's encouraged as long as you don't give her mead.
No.
I mean, I'm personally okay with it. It's just, internet standards and all that jazz.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know why.
I love the hair too, by the way, man.
I think I worked with a hat today doing punch downs, and now I look like a lunatic. Sorry about that.
No, hey, that's a working man's haircut. I like it. I'm here for it.
So how you doing?
I'm doing phenomenal today. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself real quick for those folks who may not know who you guys are, and we'll just have a good night of talking and exploring the world of mead.
Awesome. Well, so my name is James Naeger. I work with Schramm's Mead. My lovely wife is Alyson Schramm Neager. She is the CEO of Schramm's Mead, and she's the chairperson? What's your title at the Mead Institute? Chairperson, chairwoman, and founder.
The chair is what it says on the website.
I am a chair.
Chair.
Yes. It's a good title to have.
Figure out how to get Alyson.
Hey, there we go. Well, I wanted to say thank you guys for joining me tonight and giving me some of your time. As new parents, I know that is very hard to come by, not just free time, but just time in general.
Yeah, for sure. The baby was asleep up until about 5 seconds ago. So,
well, like I said, I'm a parent myself, so I think there's many parents out there that watch, so we all understand. But take the time you need to address baby's issues and needs.
No, she's as long as we're entertaining her here, she'll be fine.
Well, she's down for a good mead talk, which I'm always here for. So you guys are two of the basically key components of Schramm's Mead. Alyson being the CEO, James, your title officially is man of many hats, I'm guessing.
Something like that. Yeah, director of sales and special projects. It sounds kind of stupid, but I do a bit of everything.
Do a bit of everything there. Right on. I was really excited to get to talk to you guys, mostly about the Schramm's Mead stuff initially, and I saw you guys had done an interview with Man-Made Mead, so I really didn't want to double dip. So I was, again, hoping we could do some Mead Institute stuff here as well, because I know everybody kind of wants to, get to know the new kid on the block, so to speak. And you guys the Mead Institute is just now, I think, coming up on 2 years old-ish, and somewhere in that realm.
I've been working with the board of the Mead Institute since 2020 is when we actually got started.
Okay.
But we hadn't really launched or done any public facing activities until the last year and a half, 2 years.
Gotcha.
But before that, we were working on the tasting grid. We were working on the language chart. We met with some really cool people to make that happen, and that took quite some time to finalize. But I'm really
Awesome.
happy with the product we have now.
Well, I guess let's kind of even take it back a step. So, what is the Mead Institute? So, I read online the tagline is a nonprofit membership organization for mead professionals and consumers, promoting and educating and a global quality standards for mead. What's your guys' interpretation of what that means? Even though you're the ones who wrote it, or Alyson at least had a hand in that. But what's like the more layman's term of that?
Sure. So I think that in order to compete on a global market and compete with wine and beer and spirits for the like alcohol consuming public, we are going to have to establish quality standards. So basically, as it sits right now, quality in wine and spirits and beer is fairly well established. Beer, less so. But like what is quality in any industry?
Sure.
We never address that with mead. And the big problem with mead is that there are no rules. In terms of what a meadery is going to produce. So you'll see a lot of meads that are brewed with kind of anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no off limits. I remember when a local mead maker came in and told me he was going to make a hot dog mead, and he was going to brew it with hot dog water from hot dog packets and mustard seed for mustard and like all these different like hot dog tomatoes for ketchup flavor, and he was going to make a hot dog mead. And I honestly like
commercial place.
Yeah, it was. And I remember just thinking like, oh, like we can do anything, but should we? And
Sure.
wine right now, there's certain like laws depending on where you are. It's actually the law. If you want to label it a certain way, if you want to call it a certain thing, it has to be a certain thing. It has to be a certain grape variety, or it has to be a certain amount of aging, or it has to be aged in a certain vessel. And
Sure.
right now, there's none of that in mead. Like even like a bare level, like, what is mead?
Right.
Currently, I would say has a hard time being defined, unfortunately. Now, there's a like commonly accepted definition, but it's different from what the federal government accepts. It's different from what, sorry, go ahead.
No,
there's all kinds of different agencies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess let's stop right there real quick. And what do we, when we say definitions for mead, there's no definition, there's no rules. Who are we binding these things to? Because, the TTB certainly has, a glossary of terms. Unfortunately, mead isn't in there, and it vaguely doesn't even really fall under wine, Right. I mean, you have to interpret that within the wine definition.
So that's the problem, that it depends state to state in the United States. So Is it going to be sold with beer? Is it going to be sold with wine? Is it its own section? Like what kind of store can you even sell it in? Then there's the labeling requirements. Like, yes, you're exactly right. There is no governing body for mead at all right now. The AMFA is the only mead-only association outside of the Mead Institute, and they have a very different goal than we do, in my opinion, which is education and quality standards.
Yeah, which kind of ruffles some feathers, because it's like, the mead folks in general and the mead industry as a generalization is kind of like the wild, wild west. They think they should be able to do anything. Like they should be able to make a hot dog mead if they want to. And it's like, well, that's all well and good, but, should you be able to put anything you want to on a label? Is that quality? Like, can we try to raise the quality standard for this beverage in a way that, the Seibel Institute has done for beer and that UC Davis has done for wine?
In the U.S.
For the U.S., yeah.
Sure, yeah,
so
I mean...
in the beer industry in Germany, there's like the law, the Bavarian purity law of 1516, the Reinheitsgebot. This is what beer is. It's like very, very strict.
Sure.
I don't think that the United States meat industry needs to be that strict. I don't think that the global meat industry needs to be that strict. but I do think there needs to be like just some like loose understanding, commonality in the industry.
Yeah.
If something is made with a coffee shop syrup from that you could get at Gordon Food Services, it's not quality.
Well, and like I think quality for mead, obviously it has to come back to the quality for honey. And unfortunately, there is a lot of funny honey in the United States because there's the market for honey. We have a lot of counterfeit honey coming into the United States. There are whole countries that are banned from importing honey directly, and they have worked around that by sort of laundering it through other countries. So I think, I don't want to name a country, but there are some Asian countries where they export more honey than they are physically capable of producing.
Right.
You know, like if the entire industry was producing 1,000 pounds of honey per hive, which is an insane amount.
Right.
You know, it's like 200 times the amount that a hive would normally produce. Then maybe those numbers would make sense. But it's like, where's this honey coming from? Well, it's clearly coming from China.
Right.
And you know, the quality standards for honey in China in particular are not what they are in the rest of the world. They're extracting most of their honey before the cells have been capped over with beeswax. So before the honey is what's called ripe. So they are factory dehydrating honeys from certain areas of the world because it's, you know, 20%, 25% water content, which will ferment, you know, on its own. It's not ripened honey, so it's not honey by definition of a certain water content. So I don't know. I think that it's easy to get cheap drums of honey and make a mead, but did you have any sort of quality standard along that path? Is one of the things that we're trying to address is like, what makes a quality mead? Well, you've made it with honey that is ripened honey, and among other things.
My co-chair,
seems basic, but
my co-chair Frank Golbeck is very much into regenerative mead making and honey pieces and agriculture. And so for him, quality standards also encompass some of that, which is also a part of quality mead making. Like, I'm sorry, we have our tiny human here. In wine, it's becoming more and more common, like to go organic, but even, you know, to go beyond that and be biodynamic. I don't know what we're going to do. But bigger than the quality standards is just the generic education, like getting sommeliers and alcohol professionals and people that sell mead to know basic terminology about mead. What is mead? Like having the general public know what is mead. Having them know what is a mellow melt, what is a sizer, what is a metheglin, why are there these terms, what do they mean, why do they exist,
right.
When should I use them, what's the difference between a sizer and a cider, is mead beer? Like, well, no, like what's a braggot, what is a braggot? Right. And so that's something that the Mead Institute has been working to establish and also to spread through the communities. Like, I just wrote an article that I'm really excited about for GuildSomm, which is the like sommelier education community of studying wine professionals that are taking WSET or taking the MW or the sommelier exams or the Society of Wine Educator exams. They use this resource to study from, and that website didn't have a section on mead at all. Like, they talk about sake, they talk about calvados, they talk about cognac and armagnac, and there's sections on every wine region of the world. There's sections on beer. Right. Every spirit you can think of, including from, you know, Russia and the, like, just places like Africa, Australia, New Zealand, India.
They want to know about every
Middle
little
East,
thing about wine. But this is honey wine.
The Mediterranean, the Middle East, like the whole, everywhere. They know all the different alcohol facts and producers and
facts.
They are. It is. It's like note cards. They like want to know as much as they can about like what is Batavia, Iraq. It's like, oh well, this is some. I think it's like a Turkish spirit, and they have note cards for this. But there's nothing about mead. So finally, this website, I wrote them a little letter, like an email. I was like, hey, what if we had mead? Can I write you a section on mead? And they said, yeah. And so now there's going to be information for sommeliers who buy wine for wine lists at, all of these, the French Laundry and Canlis and
Right.
and like all these different places that are so cool, these cool restaurants where you would want to have your product if you're making a high quality product, if you're making a delicious beverage, you want to be on these. Those people will be now studying mead, which never used to exist. So I'm very excited about that.
Were you going to say 11 Madison and then you
Yeah, I was going to say 11 Madison Park, but they're vegan and they don't sell honey.
They're
so
upset with me as well.
We don't like that right now.
I wrote an article for the American Bee Journal calling out this product, which is what's it called? Melody. It's a bee-free honey. It's basically sugar syrup with flavorings, and they're marketing it to vegans that don't want to eat honey. But it's called bee-free honey, and in the United States, in New York, and California, and some other states, if it's not the product, it's not honey, and if you label it honey, it's fraud. So I wrote an article for the American Bee Journal about that, and it sort of ties into the honey quality article I wrote for Craft Beer and Brewing. But they're just the fact of the matter is there are people that are calling sugar syrup honey across the board, whether it's funny honey or out in the open, bee-free honey, and there are people that are using that stuff to make mead. You're making a sugar wine or a kilju and then flavoring it with honey and then calling it mead.
Right.
It's not. So the unfortunate part of that is that there are actors in the United States and other places that are taking advantage of the lack of a definition for mead, and they're producing basically sugar wine and other types of things that are not mead, and they're really dragging down the entire industry.
So, just for my knowledge, for the furtherness of the conversation, we are talking about commercial mead makers here in the United States, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So it sounds to me like you guys have you want to set up a quality standard, like a standard of definitions. Like, you don't want the standard of definitions to be, say, at the TTB or with the TTB. You guys want to create the standard of definitions and have like your own QMS in place, so to speak, for a quality management system in place for mead for mead overall, again, within the United States, so you can have a clear definition of this is what constitutes a mellow melt, this is what constitutes a Pyment, an Acer Glen. It's standard definition for all these terms. So when somebody like a sommelier is available or entering into the mead forum, that they have a glossary of terms that they can look at that says, okay, this is what I can expect across the board.
We don't even have a federal definition for honey. It's not.
No, we don't. I'm looking at the TTB's website right here, and there's the glossary for, there is no mead in there. We click on
honey wine being in a subcategory of what they call other than standard wine. But I'm not, it's always blown my mind how the federal government can have a standard for honey wine without a standard for honey. So like, I could be making sugar syrup and calling it honey in some states, and then have a federally approved recipe label for basically a sugar wine that is flavored with honey. And there was I'm not going to name his name, but there were basically these people making flavored sugar wines and calling them honey wines, and they had TTB approved recipes, and they were saying, here's basically what our process is.
They were out of the country.
Well, there are some importers obviously that are doing some things like, I don't know, I will name this name because I say this a lot, but Dansk Mead, the Danish mead.
I was just going to say that.
They fortify their mead with neutral grain spirits up to 19%.
Yes, they do.
And in the United States, that's totally illegal. We cannot make that wine. You'd have to use grape brandy or something at best. Well, no, you have to, if you're going to fortify a mead in the United States, you have to fortify it with a distillate from the same fermentation. So if you have a blackberry mead, you have to distill a blackberry mead and use that distillate to fortify the blackberry mead. And it's not the same for imports. So you have like rules for me and not for thee. You can import the stuff, but you can't legally make it here. And there's a reason why they don't use blackberry mead distillate, because it's a pain in the ass. So they use neutral grain spirits, which is easier and cheaper. And
Right.
In other countries, the TTB has accepted these sort of standards of operation for fortifying wines in other countries. In other countries, they're so hung up about it. You know, it's if it's neutral spirit from the distillate of the same fermentation, like what's the difference? You know, unless you're using something like a brandy or some distillate that has a bit more of that character from it. But yeah, it's totally legal in Denmark to fortify wine with neutral grain spirits, and you can import it into the United States, and it's literally everywhere in the country. But you cannot legally make that product here in the United States.
Oh,
and
that's
for all fruit wines. You can't fortify other than standard wines with anything other than distillate of that same fermentation. So if it was an apple, or if it was like a raspberry wine, you'd have to distill raspberry wine and fortify that. And some people do that. We're working on that, because obviously we have a lot of pomace, we have a lot of lees wine because of the nature of our process. We just don't have a distiller's permit yet.
I'm curious how places get by that, like with their recipes with the TTB and whatnot, because I know that there's places out there that are fortifying with like grape brandy and stuff and non-grape meads, so to speak.
My wife is saying it. She doesn't think I'm right. So grape wines can fortify with any grape brandy they want. It doesn't have to be the same.
Right.
The TTB is not consistent with their approvals either.
And they're also not.
That's for sure.
Let's next topic.
Yeah, there is at least one meadery that I know that I won't call out, because I know that I asked them basically, how did you get that approved that way? Because he told me he was fortifying with neutral grain spirits. He said, and I was like, how in the world did you get that approved? He said, I have no idea. I've just got it approved, and I've shut up for the last 15 years. But
sometimes that's the way to do it.
Paper.
Yeah, I'm not sure about any of that. I've yet to dabble into any fortifying anything in my home brewing world. I'm unfortunately not even close to becoming commercial. I would definitely like to be there someday. So you're saying that you guys have a different trajectory than the AMMA. So where they're doing more supposedly doing like legislative stuff and advocating that way, you guys are trying to set a standard for all commercial meads that are sold in the United States, again by setting up definitions and all these things. And one of the things that you guys also do is you set up your own competition, or the Mead Institute has set up their own competition called the US, I think it's called the Mead Open, or the US Mead Open, which is all judged by sommeliers and non-mead people, so to speak. So how did that go for the first year, introducing that many people to mead, or various quantities of mead? I don't know how many people in the group had already experienced it, but how was that herding that group of cats, so to speak?
So okay, first I just want to address.
That's a good metaphor.
I just want to address what you said about this standards and definitions.
Please.
We don't want to be just a resource for the United States. We want it to be a global resource. I want it to be at sommeliers, because right now, if you are buying wine, you are buying globally. You're buying from France, you're buying from Spain, you're buying from Italy. You might even be getting sparkling wine from the UK now, or from Portugal. You might be getting South African Chenin Blanc. So I'd like you to be buying Polish Półtorak Jadwiga, or Dwoźniak, or and I'd like to be able to say, this is what that is. If you're purchasing that, just look it up real quick. The other thing that I made sure to include is different cherry varieties, and because a lot of mead making and fruit wine making is based around varietal fruits. Like for us especially, Chardonnay's are king. At Schramm's Mead, we have hung our what is this expression, hat on Chardonnay cherries. But other places like Friedrichsthal, which is not mead, it's cherry wine, they're using a specific Danish cherry that they think is the best. And then there's Ballotons, and then there's Montmorency, which are used by a lot of our competition. And then there's, just like so many different, there's like the cherries that go into maraschino,
No.
which
Or
like
the one, the Luxardo cherries.
Luxardo, yeah. It's the same cherry variety, I believe.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's got to be global, because those are like, Croatian cherries and Hungarian cherries. And,
Yeah.
We might be growing them in the US, but you have to have a global perspective when you're buying and selling alcohol and when you're talking about alcohol production. So I will get back to your meat. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that the Mead Institute could do that not by trying to lobby the federal government for the United States, which would be like, throwing a rock at a dinosaur, but like,
right.
We do that like the the Brewing Association does with their craft logo, right? Which is a trademark logo.
Right.
You have to adhere by a set of basic standards, and they're not insane, I may have talked to you about this previously, but like racism and sexism have nothing to do with the craft industry in the United States. So the Brewers Association has said, if you want to have racism, sexism, all that sort of, like, if you want to call it a panty dropper, that's not going to be quality. They have some basic standards for labels, basic standards for,
But who sets those standards? Because that's a pretty open interpretation of things. I mean, like, the term panty dropper is, subjective, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think you start getting into a real slippery slope when you start trying to tell people what they can and can't name their products. I mean, this is a 21 and over beverage. We're not selling to minors here.
Yeah, for sure. It can be. I mean,
it's kind of misogynistic, right?
What is?
It's not a box dropper. Like, I don't know.
It's like, I don't know. If I'm not going to call anybody out, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
I will.
If your label has something about a venereal disease on it, right? It's probably not quality. And that sounds insane, right? But we have to talk about that, right? If you're
well played. That's not where I thought you were going with that.
Well, anyway, so in my view, the Mead Institute could institute some of these quality standards by way of a trademark logo, and then say, hey, you want to use this logo, you want a sort of stamp of approval, this is what you have. The US Mead Open had those kinds of standards, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
If a certain label had certain things on it, you couldn't enter it.
We did say for the competition it could not be racist or sexist. We explicitly, the mead could not be racist or sexist.
So what do you say to people are like skinny bitch wine and there's other places out there that use, semi-derogative language on their stuff, and they're still part of, the greater wine world, so to speak.
So skinny bitch wine is not going to be on any fine dining menu. Like, I've never seen anything like that. And in other countries, like in France, I think it's Bordeaux, which is where you have the first growth and all these like extremely expensive bottles.
Bordeaux is even crazier.
The law is that you can't even have mythical creatures on your bottle.
Right. So we're not trying to do anything like that. But do you understand? There are some basic standards that can be implemented this way.
So I think I heard you arguing the other direction of us, and I just want to make it really clear. I do not think panty dropper is something that the Mead Institute wants to associate themselves with. You would never have a #1 winning mead from a Mead Institute competition called panty dropper.
Right.
It's just not going to happen, because we are trying to be inclusive of women, and a lot of the time, and I don't know if you are like super aware of this, but the concept there is that the woman drinks so much alcohol that it's so high ABV, usually it's a higher ABV drink, that they're drunk enough to take their underwear off. So I think that personally is totally inappropriate.
Or that the alcohol is hidden, that the flavor is so much that you don't realize how much you're drinking, and you can feed the woman so much alcohol that
I don't know how.
The definition of the word is really irrelevant. I agree. I happen to agree with Alyson that's why it's called that. But I mean, I get where you're going with it. It certainly is a misogynistic and quasi sexual assault related type of thing.
Yeah.
I could probably pick a different. We could pick any one of the things. That was the one that was brought up, so I went with that one as well.
Right.
But I guess more to my point was, you know, when somebody, I guess it's ultimately you guys just want to have your own. The Mead Institute wants to have their own standard for this is what we think quality is. Here's what all the definitions for quality means to us on a global scale. If you want to be part of this organization, these are the standards that you have to adhere to. And that's no different than any other standards organization. You know, we have aerospace standards, we have food safety standards, we have all these different standards in our lives. So you should be allowed to put forth whatever you want. So what I think personally is like, I look at it more like the bakery that is asked to make a cake for somebody whose views that they don't align with, instead of somebody going out and boycotting this or, creating this movement to say, shut this bakery down. Why don't you just let the bakery exist in their own space and just, let the people just ignore them if they want to, or do whatever they want to do, like I said, you guys are more than welcome to do whatever you want to do with your definitions and have whatever you want to have. I'm just, curious of, I guess I'm not curious anything. I just say it's a slippery slope when you start setting in, subjective terms and definitions and stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think more of like, I don't know. There was something recently where Untapped gave a bunch of awards to meads that were not mellow mellows, and they were in the mellow mel category, something like that. It's like,
sure,
if we're promoting mead and promoting quality honey without a standard, like we can start with the basic stuff. Like here's our accepted definition for what mead is.
Yeah. No, I think that that's a great route to go. And like I'm not trying to ruffle any feathers and saying it's not the, that it's the wrong way to go. I'm just, I think setting those types of standards is a little bit, I don't know, like I said, a slippery slope. But I'm going to be here for the Mead Institute because what I do appreciate is the fact that the Mead Institute is out there trying to support an industry that needs a lot of support. Because I tried to have the AMMA on. I would argue that the AMMA is a little bit more well known of an institute. They've been around for longer, and they have have had some large names at their head for a while.
Yeah,
and they've bumbled and fumbled their way through a lot of stuff, especially over the past 4 years. And when I saw the Mead Institute come into light and the people who were involved with it, it gave me positive thoughts in motion that there's going to be some traction on all the things that the AMMA says they're going to do. It's kind of a bummer to hear that the legislation isn't really part of the Mead Institute's idea, but I'm actually more on board and think that and agree with you. That's like throwing rocks at a dinosaur. So coming up with your own standard and setting that in place. Like I said, we have standards for, transportation and health and safety, all these other things. So creating your own and adhering to that, I think, is the way to go. And I applaud the Mead Institute for that. I'm incredibly envious of what you've been able to pull off in the short amount of time. It's a testament to your guys' knowledge and capabilities.
Sure. I think of it more like the raw milk stuff. Like if you want raw milk, you can find it, and it's legal for you to purchase. You're just not going to stumble on it in the grocery store and get yourself sick if you're not fully aware of what you're doing. You can drink it if you want. That's a choice.
Right.
There's a certain quality standard for milk that's just sold on the shelf. So
right.
I feel like that's where we're at. We're working on the basics.
All right. So shifting gears here. I believe it was last weekend, you guys had the big yeast seminar with Mr. Ken Schramm. How did that whole thing turn out? Because I know it had been in planning for quite a while, so I'm hoping that it lived up to the expectations everybody had set for it.
Sure. So my dad has given these kind of educational talks at UC Davis, at Cornell, at other beekeeping associations, I would say, for probably 30 years now. He has been presenting on mead and educating about mead, and this fell in line with a lot of his previous presentations. We had in-person and virtual attendees, and this one was just like a very, very deep dive into yeast and yeast fermentation and the science of mead and yeast. It was really fun for everyone who got to attend. I did not get to watch it, unfortunately, because I was making sure that everything was running smoothly behind the scenes, and also had a human with me. But I wish I could have sat in and watched that one. I think it was really cool.
I love your term "small human." That's great.
Yeah.
She's feisty.
She sounds like she's a feisty one. Nothing wrong with being feisty. I love it. So one of the things that I had seen in on the Mead Institute website that is unique, and I wanted to get your guys' take on, was the Mead Institute scholarship program. So you guys have we're offering a scholarship to events like the Ken Schramm's Yeast Talk and other events that will be in the future. Did somebody get to be the recipient of that for this event, and how did that turn out?
So we actually had 4 attendees that were scholarship recipients. 2 of them through Fermenta, which is a women's craft organization in Michigan. One was, and then two were through the Mead. No, one was through an anonymous donor. Sorry, I don't want to misspeak. And then one was through the Mead Institute. So we had 4 people who got to attend on scholarship, and that was really cool because we had a very diverse group of attendees, which was really refreshing for me, especially. It is important for women to be represented in mead, and I think there's a lot of value in that diversity. Yeah. So it was a great.
Yeah, even just bringing people for such a thing, it's like I learned. I didn't watch Ken's talk, but I learned more. I learned a lot from the people that came into town for the talk. You know, like they were asking about what we were doing and, oh, have you heard about this? Have you heard about that? I'm like, no, I haven't. I've been, I'm 7 months into this baby's life, and we're just like balls to the wall trying to keep this meadery going and keep the meat industry going. Yeah. And you've got meaderies all over the country that are closing down, and so the times are hard for certain kinds of mead on the shelf right now. So it was refreshing to like bring in outside perspectives, like even just from meadery owners that I text with on a daily basis, like just having them in town. It was like, oh, you don't know about that? No, I don't. Please help me out. If you have a good tip, please send me it my way. I don't, Right. So anyway, I learned about a new kind of go firm that is non-clumping, and I'm like, yes, please, I'll take it.
Yeah, no,
it'll make my life.
Kidding. Anytime I can get anything that doesn't clump, I'm here for that.
Yeah, exactly.
So how? Let's see here. You had the Mead Institute. I had the memberships. That's what it was. The memberships. So one of the things I think is really unique about the Mead Institute is they offer a variety of memberships, up to looks like 10 different membership levels. Some of them are kind of staged of 3 or 4 different stages of a membership, but you have levels for meadery owners, for meaderies if they want to commit to a whole block of time. You've got for individuals who are professionals who aren't mead makers, which is something like the sommeliers or anybody who's like a cicerone or something like that who wants to gain more knowledge specifically about mead. You got something aimed for them. You got mead aficionados for junkies and mead heads like me. You got distributor memberships in yourself, and then you got retailers, educational institutes, industry suppliers. So you guys are really trying to hit as many different I'm not just saying many different, all of them. You're trying to be able to have a spot for any person who's even remotely tied to mead to be able to come in and join the Mead Institute.
Well, I think that's because education is valuable to everyone.
Sure.
A lot of years of people that you were talking about are selling mead or are writing about mead. So distributors sell mead, retailers sell mead, sommeliers sell mead, cicerones often will at a beer bar sell mead. So for the entire mead industry, those are people that would be super valuable to have knowledge about mead making process, and not just knowledgeable, but excited and empowered and comfortable.
Cheerleaders for mead.
So those people we definitely would love to have as members, and we would love to, help grow their mead education. One of the reasons that we created this mead tasting grid was so that people could feel more comfortable evaluating mead, talking about mead, tasting mead, and feeling like they were able to put to words what they were tasting in their glass. Because as it sits, there's like 20 different wine tasting grids, at least, that come from every different wine educational body: the Society of Wine Educators, the Court of Master Sommeliers, the Wine and Spirits Education Trust, and every university. And you can even get like tasting sheets from like novelty stores, like taste wine with your girlfriends and talk about how it tastes. But that kind of doesn't exist for mead. You don't. So you can either use a wine grid and try to make it make sense, or you could use some sort of a beer tasting document and try to make that make sense. But we wanted something that was really specific to mead flavor and honey, and that was all encompassing of the fact that mead flavors can kind of come from anything, like the hot dog water.
You don't find a lot of mead with chili peppers in it,
But you do.
Or you don't find a lot of wine with chili pepper. I mean,
okay.
Oh, for sure.
Like a lot of the hot chili pepper stuff is not on the wine tasting grids, but you may have a mead really fantastic that's made with peppers and, Lapsang Souchong tea, we've had one recently. And those are some of the flavors are you're not going to find really on a lot of wines unless it's a weird one.
Yeah.
So they have it on these tasting grids.
The big difference with the wine, though, is that it's a flavor that's coming from the grapes. So when you're tasting a wine and it tastes like cinnamon, that's a varietal character of that grape. Or it comes from a barrel. It can come from oak aging. But it's not likely that that spice character came from cinnamon, right? So, but in mead, if you're getting nutmeg, cinnamon, clove, cardamom, allspice, lavender, sage, there's a high likelihood that it didn't come from a barrel, and it didn't come from a cherry variety that tastes like cinnamon. It didn't come from the honey.
Good.
It probably came from cinnamon itself, nutmeg itself, cloves, allspice, whatever herb, marshmallows.
Marshmallows. There's a guy that comments marshmallows on every post we make.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, the ones that kill me is the guys out there that are doing like the soda meads. Like there's a Mountain Dew mead thing right now, I guess, been going around for a while. There's a new one that's Dr. Pepper meads. And I don't mean like going back to what you've been saying about adulterated honey. These guys are making mead with Mountain Dew as the fermentable sugar. It's like that's not even close to a mead. And using the term mead is kind of like bastardizing it. It makes me really feel some type of way about it.
Yeah, it looks kind of like something from Fallout or something, like...
I wish I'd get some Nuka-Cola.
It's like they say, "Ooh, this is better than I thought it was," but it's like, oh, we'll just have to take your word for it, I guess. It looks toxic.
Oh.
On the one hand, I agree with you that would fall into the not quality, in the quality standards of the Mead Institute.
Right.
But on the other, I am grateful that there is this guy, because it's all from this one guy who's making all these reels and had a ton of success.
The social media guy.
I think it's arguable personally, but go on.
He is bringing at least a vague knowledge of mead to millions of people.
Yeah,
true.
And so even if these millions of people just say like, hey, what is that? I want to learn more. Or what does that mean? Or is it really alcohol? And they just start doing some Google searches. Like, it would be nice if they had a reference to say like, what is mead? Like, what is a quality mead? What is, what is a good resource for me to learn more about mead? And right now, I would say one of the best resources is still Got Mead, right? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
And that looks, it's not super modern.
No.
The site, like does keep it up and she does do cool podcasts and stuff. But I think that for that to be the best resource when it's not her full-time job, it's not an organization, she's just doing a great job as a home mead maker.
Right.
I think that really highlights kind of where we're missing some industry knowledge and information.
And we were talking about a mead school. Like, there is nowhere where you can go to pay to learn how to make mead and get any sort of
degree
certification and say I did this many hours of training at the Mead Institute school or whatever like that. So you know, something that the Mead Institute could look at after they've got some basic standards in place to say, these are the standards for how quality mead is made. You know, do we boil the honey in the water? Must. You know, that used to be something that we would do for meads, like long ago when we're destroying the colonies. You know, they would make whole hive meads by boiling everything. And, you know, that you could replicate that. You could boil your whole hive mead and do a wild fermentation, and it would be kind of weird. It would taste weird. Is that
I'm here for wild fermentations.
Yeah. I mean, there's a difference between, like, you know, you mentioned Belgium and some of these sour beers. It's like, you know, Cantillon's been making quality stuff for a very long time. But there's a difference between, like, the guy in my homebrew club had like a really weird beer that went bad, you know. But with mead, it's like you can find both examples on the shelf of like Frank Goldbeck makes some very, very high quality sour and wild funky meads, and there's just a different quality spectrum between an intentionally soured mead and something that went sour and they decided, well, we have to sell it anyway, so we're going to package it and call it a sour mead. You know, we've all had those meads. We've all bought those meads.
Unfortunately. Yeah. I've reached out to Frank at least once. I tried to get him on. Unfortunately, wasn't able to make it happen. But anybody who's got a unique ferment going on like that, with, I believe he specifically uses lactobacillus in his stuff. I believe he was saying in his post earlier that those people are pushing the boundaries of what mead can be and doing things, especially on a commercial scale. You know, I like seeing that. I think that's as unique and cool as, you know, the hot dog water mead, which I personally find absolutely atrocious and completely like, just reprehensible. But I guess you do need the creativity. You need the people out there pushing the boundaries to help grow the mead brand and to grow, you know, the everything as a whole. So it's definitely cool to see, you know, people doing that. Is that type of stuff, do you think, going to be encouraged by the Mead Institute? Or, you know, I mean, I personally think that, you know, when you set limits for yourself, it happens to increase people's creativity, because it gives you, you know, when something's just free range, you know, it goes all over the place and people kind of get lost. But when you start setting rules and parameters, I don't even call them rules, just call them parameters, put those in place, then it really gives people kind of a path to go to make something more creative than they would have otherwise.
So let's just use like wine as an example here.
Sure.
But you could do the same for beer in Germany and the Reinheitsgebot and all that. Like there's a big difference between like a German Hefeweizen and a beer that has been brewed with graham crackers and marshmallows and put into a barrel and then put into another barrel and then strained through coffee beans and vanilla beans and like
strained through coffee.
You know, sounds like delicious.
Over Angel's Tears.
Yeah. Kitchen sink mead.
Beer.
Kitchen sink beer, yeah. Like
there is a market for both of those things.
Sure.
Right? There's definitely a market for both of those things.
Yeah.
The Hefeweizen, you know, that have been around for 1,000 years. If you pick it up off the shelf, you know what you're getting, right?
Right.
You know it's going to taste a certain way, it's going to drink a certain way, it's going to look a certain way, the carbonation is going to be a certain way.
Right.
You know what you're getting. consistent in its quality. And a sommelier is able to give that to a guest and say, here's your Hefeweizen, here's your Gueuze, here's your Kriek Lambic, here's your, Pesh Lambic, here's a specific thing that you got. This is what you're getting. Yeah. Now, craft beer got wild, and that's okay. There was a huge market for it. People loved it. There are high quality barrel-aged beers. There are high quality beers with, arguably
fruited sours
ingredients. Yeah. No, definitely fruited sours in the U.S. But like donuts, right?
You could go out. You'd have to go out of your way to get a beer in Germany made with donuts.
No, you couldn't.
It's not legal. I'm saying you'd have to like go in a back alley somewhere. But
right.
I got.
I probably have
imported.
I probably have a donut mead in this house.
Can I finish it?
Okay, go ahead.
So, but it's the same thing with wine. So, like, let's say you are a huge fan of Cabernet Sauvignon, right? I love Cabernet Sauvignon. It is delicious. It's so good. Well, in the United States, it has to have a certain percentage of Cabernet Sauvignon grape.
Yeah, which seems like really basic,
But it's not 100% unless you're in a certain area in a certain sub-district, and like it's not 100%. If you're shopping for Alsatian white wines, which Alsace is that like nice little area that passed back and forth between France and Germany, it is 100%. So like if you get a Gewürztraminer, which is a grape variety that is commonly used in mead making, Gewürztraminer, Riesling, Muscat, they all make great meads. But if you buy one of those 3 wines from Alsace, it is 100% Gewürztraminer. It is 100% as long as it's at a certain level. Like if it's labeled Grand Cru, you know what you're getting. It's from a certain year. 100% of the grapes are that variety. In the U.S., you can still make wine with Cabernet Sauvignon grapes and marshmallows, or age it in a bourbon barrel. Like same thing with.
Does anybody do that though?
Yeah. No, you do.
Bourbon,
here's the
Cabernet
thing. If you think about like Bartles and James, like there's these different products that are like wine coolers, wine pop, and there's like Skinny Girl. Well, we won't, whatever. Go back on that.
Yeah.
There are like Skinny Girl wines that are sold at gas stations and grocery stores, and it's like this is 10 calories, and it's this and that, or it's got lime juice and tequila infused into it, or like whatever different things. You can still buy wild and weird things in wine, but that doesn't mean that you can't find high quality wine that is labeled specifically, that you know exactly what you're going to get, and that a sommelier can present to someone, or even a cicerone, or even someone at just a grocery store or a wine shop can say, I know what this is. I know what this is. It's labeled this way. I can guarantee you it's this, and it's going to taste like this.
Yeah. Are you still in California?
Unfortunately.
So ask somebody who's into wine in California about something called Mega Purple. It's like a grape concentrate.
Oh, yeah.
That they add to wine, and it adds like a depth of color, and it adds a very specific flavor, right? And I've
got some at the vinegar spot I work at.
If you train yourself for Mega Purple, you'll start tasting it. You'll ruin a lot of wines for yourself, because all of a sudden you're like, oh, I paid $60 for this bottle of wine, but I'm tasting this cheap industrial component, which is used to sort of spoofulate the wine.
There's laws in different places.
Yeah. You can't do that in some places.
That you can't acidify, you can't chaptalize. Like there's certain, like, which is like this back sweetening. Like there are different laws in different places about what you can do, how much you can do it, and that doesn't mean that you can't do it ever, right? It doesn't mean you can't be creative. It just means you can't label it a certain way. So like,
you don't want to piss on people and call it rain, basically.
Right.
And
so
that's
like,
what standards would
sort
of try to prevent.
In Italy, like let's use Italy as an example.
Please.
Have you heard of Barolo?
I'm incredibly ignorant to everything wine related, so assume I have heard of nothing.
Okay.
So, it's like an Italian wine.
It's a wine
type
region.
Of wine.
But if you're getting a Barolo, if you buy it, it's a region. It's like Napa Valley of Italy, or or Napa
like
County maybe.
Champagne, where it's a region.
Champagne is a region. Barolo is a region. However, if something is labeled Barolo, it's always 100% Nebbiolo.
Yeah.
So if you buy a bottle that's labeled Barolo, it's going to say 100% Nebbiolo.
Okay.
You can buy
Let me
wine
finish,
made
please.
in Barolo that don't fit those
James,
definitions. They just say Barolo.
Correct. That's right. So he
So
did get it.
You be creative as you want in Barolo. If you're in Italy and you want to make wine with
Riesling.
Nebbiolo and cinnamon and bananas and
Riesling.
and age it in a bourbon barrel.
And Cabernet Sauvignon. Cabernet Sauvignon especially.
You can still do it. You just can't use the word Barolo on your label. Because it's really a consumer protection idea.
Right, exactly. You know what you're going to get.
If you're looking for really, really good wine from Barolo, if it says Barolo, you know what you're going to get. I think the same thing could be true for the Mead Institute. If it says, here's the Mead Institute logo, you know what you're going to get. It's a Polterac with the Mead Institute logo. It's going to be a Polterac.
But James is not on the Mead Institute.
I'm not
board.
on the Mead Institute.
So when he talks,
I'm
and
just
when
a
he
booster.
was talking earlier, some of these are his personal ideas.
Yeah.
These ideas are not representing the Mead Institute.
Right.
Right.
I'll put a big caveat down in the comment section that James's opinions are his own and not that of necessarily of the Mead Institute.
And he led us into a frickin' lion's den for no reason in the beginning of this conversation. Yeah. I wish he hadn't done that. I'm sorry that he did.
Well,
that was
I like
cool.
all conversation. The conversation being had in public is the one I like. You know, when people like to have these types of conversations behind closed doors and we don't want to discuss better ways to further the Mead community, you know, legitimate ways to further the Mead community, which I 100% believe the Mead Institute has those, you know, indications in heart. You know, when we talk about that behind closed doors is when progress doesn't happen. You know, that's why I wanted to have the AMMA on last week. You know, there's so many conversations people have behind closed doors about what they're doing, what they're not doing, their effectiveness, this, that, and the other thing. I wanted to hear from the horse's mouth, and they decided to, you know, not show up. So I'm really glad that you guys popped in today, and I love the conversation. I'm here for it.
Can I please?
I was pushing for years.
No, you're cut off, James. Alyson needs to finish her point.
Here, go ahead.
The point is, if you buy a Barolo, you get 100% Nebbiolo. So that same thing can happen if you have honey that's high quality and you're buying leatherwood honey from Tasmania, or you're buying heather honey from Scotland, or you're getting meadow foam. If you buy a mead that's labeled meadow foam right now, there isn't any standard for how much percentage of honey is actually meadow foam. It could be 20% meadow foam and 20% marshmallows. It's like vanilla beans, and they're just spoofing it up to make it taste like it's really expensive meadow foam honey, but the rest of the honey is from, you know, some back market.
Back market.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, you could.
I hear you. It's adulterated in some way.
You could back sweeten it.
But we don't even have.
And it's really going to taste like meadow foam. But is that a meadow foam traditional?
Well, the unfortunate thing is that we don't even have standards within honey for what, you know, how much meadow foam, quote unquote, has to be in a meadow foam honey to make it a honey, a varietal. My current understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's actually less than 50% capacity of a single varietal before it can be labeled as such. I believe it was like 45%. Again, under my current understanding.
It's not even a percentage for the honey. It just is that it has to be the prominent character of the honey. And that's kind of subjective.
Agreed.
There is no federal definition for like what is a honey, much less what is a meadow foam honey. You know, orange blossom honey is usually not 100% orange. It's usually lemon and lime, and all the citrus honeys get lumped together and they call it orange blossom. There could not have been there could be zero orange blossom nectar in there. It could be all lemon and lime, and they're still selling it as orange blossom. Right. So there's really not
because you
a
can't
whole lot of
buy
standards
lemon
that way,
and lime blossom. Like you can't
find
that.
You can, but it's all subjective.
Right.
Anybody can say, I have my 5 of limes, I have bees, this is lime blossom honey. But on the other hand, you know, it's all lumped together for the most part as orange blossom, even though it could not be from oranges.
One of the things that Frank and my dad and Carvin and a professor at a university here in Michigan have been interested in doing is some fingerprinting, basically testing that will allow mead makers potentially to send their honey off for analysis and have it verified as a certain variety.
You verified it. verify that it's from where it's from where they said it's from.
Right.
You can verify. I mean, you can verify a lot about it. I last year was my first year beekeeping. I sent a sample of my spring honey off for a pollen analysis. Like, that's kind of like a very odd step for a mead maker, you know, to like actually look at where the honey is coming from. We could just call it a wildflower and move on with our lives, but like, where is the honey actually coming from? Is it coming from a dumpster, or is it coming from some blueberry crop? You know, like, there's a huge difference in what the character of the honey will be. So like,
Right.
I feel like the sky is the limit, really, in terms of how we can bring to bear a lot of technologies for the meat industry and say, hey, this is something that we need to look at. Whether you're using honey that's true source certified, it's like, that's one sort of certification. Whether you agree with their program or not,
Right.
you know, that is independent. It's a third party organization that has said,
Right.
if you meet these certain criteria and you apply for our program and you go through the steps, you can call it true source certified honey.
Sure.
And so that's, in my view, that's kind of where the Mead Institute is going.
I think
it's a third party.
One of the biggest things that I think is the most important for the meat industry is just to understand what other industries are doing and what other countries are doing and why and what's working. And that's part of the reason I've spent so much of my life now learning about beer and spirits and wine and what these different standards are and what works best and what might be able to be applied to mead.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there's every different region for wine has its own organization, you know, whether it's the Champagne, which is like Comté de Champenois, like there's these different, you know, whatever their actual name is. There's old vines in Chile, and there's South African, you know, wine of origin system, and you know, you have to send different things off for testing and different. There are a million different ways that you can organize yourself and categorize your products and market your product. And mead is just so in the infancy, like it's just a little baby. And so a lot of this for me isn't even necessarily saying, this is what the standard will be. I'm setting the standard. Here's what it is. It's saying, what are our options? Like, what could we even do? What are other people doing? Here's some different ideas. Like, here's what I think works in this region. And they sell a lot of sweet wine, so that might apply to sweet mead makers. And here's a region that sells things in smaller bottles. And like, here's a region that is working to establish themselves, like wines of South Africa. Like, they don't have a big following in the US. They have a similar problem to mead in that people don't know. It's not like Napa Valley Cabernet, you know, like what's happening?
Right.
What even is this? Steen. Well, that's Chenin Blanc. Like, anyway, I don't want to tell people what the standards are. I want to tell people, here's what I think is maybe a good idea based off of what all these other people are doing and based off of this knowledge that I've gathered in my wine studies and beer studies and spirits studies.
You want there to be a standardization of terms to better mead as a brand and as an entity as a whole. And you're not saying that this is what it has to be. You're saying, hey, let's have a conversation and start gearing the brand as an industry, as people who work within the industry. Let's start gearing ourselves towards something that's a little more professional and a little more, a little less Wild West, so to speak, and a little more refined.
The Wild West will always exist. I'm not saying we as an industry can't have a Wild West.
Sure.
We can have a Wild West. We will have a Wild West, and we should have a Wild West.
They're not going anywhere.
That will always exist. But we want to also have the other side of this spectrum. And I think that that is kind of what is lacking. And what I want is a common vocabulary and a common, like a database, like a place that you can go for reference and to understand. Like right now, there is like a handful of books on mead, and most of them are home mead making. There's no Oxford companion to mead. There's no, you know, like the complete Windows on the Mead. Like
Right.
there's so many wine and beer books, way more wine than beer.
Right.
And we have not even hit the tip of the iceberg with the possibilities for like Mead literature and knowledge and education. So
We've got a nameable number of books for mead making, and beer has beer making for dummies.
But wine, like you could fill my room, like you could fill an entire space with wine books and not have every wine book that's out there.
Well, and for me, in my view, there's so many possibilities because of the nature of terroir and the nature of beekeeping. All beekeeping is local, and if you're using honey from a specific region, obviously it's going to taste different from if you used a honey from 50 miles over or 100 miles over even. So like, even if you're using a standard quality process, there's room to explore a lot of different nuance by highlighting the unique aspect of what makes mead mead, which is the honey, in my view. You know, it's more complicated than grape wine may ever be. But then again, there are wineries, you know, whatever, in the Willamette Valley. We sort of did a deep dive for the Willamette Valley. It's like
Oregon,
this side, you know, this south-facing slopes are different from the east-facing slopes. So I think there is a lot to offer the mead industry by providing them with the resources to highlight those things in their marketing and say, you know, instead of trying to stand out with some sort of provocative label, maybe you can say, hey, I got this honey from this specific beekeeper in this specific region, and the bees in this season, you know, 2023 honey was, these bees were gathering nectar from these specific flowers, and sort of just tell a story that highlights the nature of what mead is, as opposed to trying to get a name for ourselves in some other way that might be of a lesser quality.
And honey does showcase terroir, I think, better than any other fermentable sugar. Like,
sure. Oh yeah, you get a dry mead, and that's nothing but flower guts.
Yeah.
Well, and like wildflower honey, if you think about it, and this is kind of a weird one to wrap your head around. Wildflower honey is the most common type of honey that you can find on the shelf, right? If it's whatever the bees wanted to make, you can call it wildflower. It's a multifloral honey. If you think about it, every time you extract honey and call it wildflower, you are never going to be able to replicate that specific combination of floral visits. You know, the bees in the same area, same bees, same area, they may never create that honey ever again.
Right.
It may get to something similar, but it's like a snapshot in time of what has been going on with the bees.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I think that even with something as sort of simple as wildflower, I think that there are a lot of ways that we can talk about what makes it a quality honey, what makes it a quality beverage, in ways that can enhance value for our industry stakeholders, other than saying, here's what you can and can't do.
Like, I know that I just want to make it really clear. The Mead Institute isn't here to crusade for people's rights.
Social
That's
justice.
like minor, tiny component of our competition was that we didn't want any racist or sexist labeling. So I feel like that was such a big part of our earlier conversation, and I was not expecting that to be discussed at all. You know, like it's just such a minor thing that it felt like, because someone made a comment that said like, where does the line get drawn when you're offended? And I'm like, it's not me personally being offended. It's just doing the right thing, and I don't know. Anyway.
Right. So beer has Jackson and Eckhart. Wine has Johnson and Robinson. Mead needs a map maker to guide folks where to seek.
Probably mead maker, yeah, or maybe map maker. I don't know. Guiding, yeah.
No.
So we were talking about.
Welcome to Cartography Chat with TK and Drinks.
I mean, that's such a huge part.
Speaking of guiding people, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah.
It's so cool. No, you do it.
No, thank you.
So you know how wine has sommeliers and beer has cicerones.
Yeah.
We need something for mead.
Oh, BJCP mead judge isn't good enough, you say?
Well, no,
And I completely agree.
we need a mead specific person. You know, like we have honey sommeliers. You know, we need the mead sommelier.
And there's pommeliers.
There's pommeliers.
There's
a water cicerone out there, I've heard.
I would like that. Sounds really fun.
That does sound
I feel like
great.
that's the healthiest hobby I could
That's
take
like the
up.
Larry
Like water tasting.
That is the most Larry David hobby I would ever imagine. But we need something for mead. There is a bird. There's a whole genus of birds called the honey guides.
Yeah.
And they're actually some of the OG animal, human, honeybee interactions that are like recorded in history. They will guide human beings to the wild honeybee colonies so that they can eat the larvae. And then it just so happens that the human beings are doing the work of extracting it all, and they get the honey out of it. It's just a really kind of romantic and beautiful human animal interaction. You know, it's like honey hunting is like the original way that we interact with honeybees. I just put a little bit over the summer. I taught myself how to hunt for beehive colonies, and I didn't have the benefit of birds working with me, but honey guides, you know, the indicatority, that could be something that we work towards as an industry to say, here's a mead professional, whatever you want to call it. It's a guide for telling people, hey, this one is really good. This one, if you're feeling up for strawberry, guava, passion fruit with a little bit of vanilla and marshmallow, go for this and get wild. You know, but if you're going to spend $150, maybe buy this one.
That's an interesting concept. Like you said, that with the going back to the terroir thing, it's such a broad spectrum that I think that might be kind of hard to pinpoint something like that down. Is, you know, because things change so frequently. But I'm here for the concept. Anything that's a step to trying to make the meat industry more solidified, more on a level playing field with other alcoholic beverages, I'm on board with it. You know, we're not doing it now. It could be a 5% better change, and I'm here for anything that, like I said, makes progress.
I mean, you can walk into any restaurant in America and find 20 different wines on the list at least, and like trying to guide the consumer to something that they're going to enjoy and be happy with having ordered in a restaurant. That is the role of a sommelier. It's like, I need to be educated about what a Barolo is, and if this person says something to me that indicates they might not like Barolo, I'm not gonna guide them towards that wine.
It's like
we need the same thing for me.
You're betting on the bottle. You're saying I have $20, $30, $50, $100. And you go to the guy who knows the horse is the best. And you're like, hey, who's running
Which
well?
of these horses is
it's
good?
like, well, so they're going to look at the list and they're going to say like, oh, I know this producer. I've had their product before. It's usually pretty good. I like this variety of honey. Like if you have someone who hates the flavors that you'll get, like hates marshmallows. Well, you want someone who's going to be able to say, you hate marshmallow flavor. You don't want something that's confectionery. You probably don't want to.
Meadowfoam Bochet is not for you.
But that person also has to be super knowledgeable. Like, okay, you love things that are super tart. If you like Riesling, then you might like something that is a tart cherry mead. You might really enjoy a high acid raspberry mead. If you love Sauterne, which is a super sweet and kind of herbal and kind of got that like black currant.
Salty, actually.
Sauterne?
The ones
be kind of sweaty.
I had.
Butterized. It's got some, you know.
You might like Leatherwood meads. You might like, what's that one from Chile? Ulmo? Do you know what I'm talking about? It's a honey variety. From like
I've heard the name. I don't know how it's pronounced. I've never had any of it, unfortunately.
But when I tasted that, I thought, okay, a Sauterne drinker might enjoy this. Or someone who likes Leatherwood might like this honey because it's very similar and very herbal. And so I'm just saying that there is potential for a professional who can help guide you and can say, if you're going to put a $30 bet on whether or not you'll like that,
$30 bet.
You know,
I like
that's
that.
what it is.
Yeah.
No, you're 100% right there. That I don't think you could have put it better, Allison. That when you want to put a bet down, you want to have some education behind your bet.
Yeah.
Well, and for the good of the industry, we want a lot. You know, we want a lot of gambling going on. You know, it's like there, unfortunately, are breweries that have fallen into this trap. There are a lot of wineries that fall into this trap, and there are meaderies that are purposefully doing it. I feel like, but it's like they'll just throw everything at the wall to see what sticks, and the consumer is so freaking confused. They're like,
Yeah.
I can only buy so many shitty meads before I give up on mead, you know?
Right.
And somebody's got 75 SKUs and they're all terrible. Like, there are certain forces that can conspire to have certain brands dominate the shelves, and they're all like, so what is a consumer supposed to think? I don't like mead is what they will, that's their conclusions. I don't like mead because I had 5 of these ones and they were all terrible.
Well, also, if they've only ever had mead from a bad home brewer, you know, your buddies invite you down to the basement in their garage and they pull something out and it's like 95 degrees in their garage and they're like, here, try this. And it's like really, really terrible and it never had a chance. And then they have that from some other friends and some other home mead makers who are making crappy meads. And then they go into a wine store and there's a sommelier who's like, I don't know what mead is. You know, or they go into a bar. It's like they don't even know what mead is, or they've only had the same experience. No one is going to bet on us because they're going to assume it's bad. And so we need to not just infiltrate the consumer's mindset, but also the people that are selling to say, there is good mead. Not all mead is bad.
If you've only ever had whiskey from a homebrew club meeting, and then you stumble upon bourbon, it's like, wow, bourbon is a standard. There's a history behind it. They're all doing it a similar way.
Yeah.
Not to say that you can't go to Kentucky and get whiskey that is not bourbon, but it's like, this is the standard that we're all going to agree on for bourbon, and everybody is going to benefit from that, you know?
Yeah.
But like the homebrew club whiskey guy that's making it in these little, you know,
Dump kegs.
I think they're 5-liter mini barrels. So that's not going to be anything like bourbon.
Right.
You know?
So we're not saying the Wild West won't exist. We just want people to know that there is the opposite end of the spectrum.
I think that's a good way of putting it. Because I'd say the Wild West is almost exclusively what exists today. So I appreciate your coming on and helping clarify some of those things. And it certainly didn't intend for the question to be a deterrent and to sidetrack the way it did. It was just more of I guess, wanting clarification. And I feel that you've genuinely given me, a better understanding of what the Mead Institute is. They're not necessarily here that you want to have standards in place. So, horribly offensive things don't get through, but it's not so much about that. It's more about having a standardization of terms, practices, ingredients, quality, different things lined up so that when somebody sees a Mead Institute logo on someone's bottle, they can at least know that there's a minimal amount of effort that's been put into this bottle to ensure that you're getting a quality product.
I mean, we want what bourbon has, it's like you can do a lot within bourbon's restrictions and they will taste wildly different, but generally what you're getting. If you're bottled in bond, you know what you're getting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a standard.
The bottled in bond legislation was the first consumer protection legislation in the United States. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
But a lot of bourbon is bottled in bond nowadays because it's relatively easy and people fucking love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love bottled in bond bourbon.
Actually,
but that's the standard.
Yeah. I believe that's actually where the term the real McCoy came from, was out of the moonshining eras. There was a doctor, Dr. McCoy, who was not a drinker at all, but disliked prohibitions to such a degree that he was making and saw people was getting poisoned with subpar alcohol, that he started creating his own, and he was, I guess, selling it off, out in international waters and stuff. And it basically, he was like, if you got McCoy's liquor, it was the real McCoy. That was some high quality liquor that wasn't going to make you go blind.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
I've heard that lore. But there's also like, think about proof, right? What is the proof?
Proofing. Yeah.
Yeah.
The concept of proofing is like,
you used to have to prove.
It is a quality standard.
They would take out, it was gunpowder, right? And there was a certain way that it would burn, and you would prove.
You would prove it, yeah.
So
you'd have to prove that it met that standard. And so, yeah. Not to say that you can't sell alcohol that's of a lesser proof. Totally fine. But if you're going to put it on the bottle and say 100 proof, it had better be 100 proof. And you can prove it. And
there's laws behind bottle and bond. It has to be 100 proof. It has to be from a single season, from a single distillery. It has to be 4 years.
Aged under the supervision of the government. Some people think that's insane, but like, it is to prevent people from making something that is not whiskey and calling it whiskey.
Right.
And
nobody get on an airplane that's not government inspected.
Exactly. People are making not mead, and they're calling it mead, and they're bringing us down.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, anyway. We've been at an hour and a half. I'll let you guys know I own baby girls here to get ready to do her thing. So I appreciate your guys' time. I would love to have you back on to speak more about this and get further, maybe even with more Mead Institute cast, because I'm definitely changing my opinion on a lot of things, and I would love to be able to, again, further this discussion. I think there's a lot of really good conversation to be had.
Yeah, and there's some hard conversations to be had. It's like nobody really wants to be told what to do, generally speaking. But
no, Mead is a bunch of cowboys.
That's not what we're trying to do. It's like we're trying to say, like, hey, these stirrups will make you go faster.
Right.
You know what I mean? And if you want to do that, you can be a cowboy, but you'll be a better cowboy, you know?
Yep.
Anyway.
Absolutely.
I'd love to come back on and talk about the competition. I don't think I got to answer that question at all.
Oh.
And we will be having a 24 Mead Institute competition, so...
Maybe when we get closer, we could come in, have you guys on, and do a whole thing about it, and then do a little promo for the competition.
That'd be fun.
Something.
That
awesome.
Sounds good. It's October 2nd this year.
Oh, that's my wife's birthday, so I'll definitely be sending in something for that. Thank you guys so much for being here. Anybody who's not following the Mead Institute already, go give them a check out. Like I said, they've got a ton of, at least 8 different membership levels, depending on what your involvement in the mead community is. And they've got a lot of big plans for the Mead brand as a whole. So go give them a check out and see if they're right for you. Again, thank you guys so much for being here, and we'll be in touch, and we'll get something squared away for the future.
Thank you.
Thanks, bud.
Thanks for having us.
No, thank you guys so much. Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Right on. Well, that was awesome. Definitely glad Alyson and James showed up for that. I wish I could have got some conversation like that from the AMMA people. You know, I come in here with preconceived notions and have thoughts on what's going to be happening and all these things, and it ends up not being the case, or being me misinterpreting something. So it's always cool to get those types of things squashed and squared away, or even, like I said, most importantly, just brought to the table. So thank you guys very much for being here tonight. Appreciate everybody popping by. And I will see you next Wednesday with another Inside the Mead Maker Studio. Peace.